Hey guys, I'm Aditya and in this video I'm going to help you get started with manual mode on your smartphone. So first you want to make sure that your smartphone's camera app actually has a pro mode or a manual mode. If it doesn't, then you can download a third-party app such as Adobe Lightroom or an app called Manual Camera, and that will let you access all these features from any smartphone. Okay, so first let's look at how do you get the proper exposure in camera. Now, related to exposure, there are two settings, that is your shutter speed and your ISO. I'm gonna tell you what ISO is and then we're gonna go to what shutter speed. So what is ISO? ISO is your camera sensor's sensitivity to light. So basically if you increase the ISO, your image is going to get brighter, while if you decrease it, it's going to be not as bright. I have a little scene set up here. I'm going to demonstrate what ISO does to your image. Right now you can see the image is too dark and I'm on ISO 100. As I slowly increase the ISO, the image gets brighter and brighter. Other than controlling the exposure, ISO also affects your image in another way. Basically, increasing the ISO also adds noise or grain to the image. So if you have a very high ISO, your image will be really grainy and noisy, and you usually don't want that as it degrades the quality of the image. Next up is the shutter speed. Now what shutter speed is, it's how long your shutter will remain open. So if I have a shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second, it's going to open and close really fast. While if I have a shutter speed of 1 second, it's going to stay open for 1 second and then close. Exposure wise, a longer shutter speed will give a brighter image, while a shorter or faster shutter speed is going to give you a darker image. So here you can see how shutter speed affects your image. Right now I'm at a really slow shutter speed and you can see the image is completely blown out. As I slowly make the shutter speed faster, you can see the image gets darker and darker. You can use this to control the amount of light coming into your sensor, and that will help you get the perfect exposure. Like ISO, shutter speed also controls another element in your image, and this is motion blur. Say I have a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second and a car passes by through the frame. You will be able to see the movement of the car in the frame. The car will be blurred and you would be able to see the motion. You won't have a sharp car. And while if I used a shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second, the motion of the car would have been frozen and the car would have appeared to be still. Shutter speed can also be used artistically. Like in this image, I used a slower shutter speed to show the movement of the taxi moving across the frame. It's done by a technique called panning, where you pan the camera with the same speed as the object or subject, and everything around it seems to have motion blur while the subject remains sharp. In this image, I used a faster shutter speed to freeze the motion, and as you can see, there's no motion blur and the lemon is captured tack sharp. Now that we're done with the exposure settings, we can move on to white balance. What white balance is, it basically helps you to get most true colors depending on the color temperature of the lights around you. Say I was being lit by tungsten lights, I would set the white balance to tungsten and this would give me the most accurate colors. Right now I'm being lit by a light which is balanced at 5600 degrees Kelvin. So my white balance on my camera is set to 5600 degrees Kelvin, and that gives me the most true to life colors. Let's see how white balance affects your image. Right now I'm being lit by light which is daylight balance, as I said before. So at daylight you can see the white is actual white, while if I move it to tungsten it's way too blue, or if I make it too cloudy it's too orange. So this is basically how white balance affects your image, and you want the whites to be proper white. Cameras have this setting called Aperture to control the amount of background blur in your image. Now, since most smartphones do not have this setting, you control the amount of background blur by moving physically closer to the subject or away from it, or by moving the subject away from the background or moving it closer to the background. Say the subject in this frame is this red figure, and right now you can see the two figures behind are blurred, but if I move closer to the red figure you can see the objects behind are even more blurred, while if I move away you can see both of them are relatively sharper compared to before. You can also control by physically moving the subject away from the background. As you can see, I moved the red figure quite closer toward the camera, and now the background is farther away, and you can see the background is much more blurred while it was when the subject was near the background. So that was it for this video. Hope you all enjoyed and hope I cleared any doubts about manual mode on your smartphone.